shark, do-do-do-do-do, Daddy shark, do-do-do-do-do, Daddy shark. Grandma shark, do-do-do-do-do, Grandma shark, do-do-do-do-do, Grandma shark, do-do-do-do-do, Grandma shark.
Morning, Andy.
Grandpa shark, do-do-do-do-do.
This is in honor of you. You've never heard Baby Shark, so now you have. You're welcome. Now you understand the song. This is all for you, Andy. I did it for you. Welcome everybody to the Week 3 recap. Even though Week 4 is technically already started, I have to apologize for getting this up on a Saturday morning. It's been a heck of a week. My son has been sick. He's had explosive diarrhea all week, and that's just terrible. Poop in places I didn't know poop could be. So he's feeling better today, though. So you get morning coffee with me, and going to do a quick recap of last week. Probably won't spend a ton of time because we've already moved into Week 4, and then I'll give you a little bit of an update. I will say, first and foremost, I messaged Eric Thursday night prior to Davante Adams putting up his 20-point game, and did tell him that I felt he was going to be the upset of the week over me. So that's out there. It was a pre-done prediction. It has nothing to do with the way that the scores sit now. So with that being said, I'm going to jump into what was tagged as last week's game of the week. Also what was tagged as last week's upset city between Randy and best friend Brett. So jumping in now, if my computer decides to work. Hope everybody was safe with the storms last night. And it's not working. Interesting. Technical difficulties. Please stand by. I can speak at it from a high level. It was actually the biggest blowout of the week. And it was like 161. Now my computer's completely not working. Here we go. I apologize. I had this all together. I was ready to start talking about things, and then, whatever. So it was 161 to 116 at a high level. It looks like Randy was led by surprise, surprise, Christian McCaffrey and Patrick Mahomes, and then followed up in a close third by Dak Prescott, Mike's. I'm going to continue to remind him, Mike's opportune keeper that he decided to pass on for none other than the garbage Mr. Trubisky. So it is, that's kind of where it stands. Brett was led by Tyler Lockett, who had a huge game. He had Darren Waller, who had a huge game, and Ezekiel Elliott, who put up big numbers as a dude and a man. Finally got the computer to work to go into a little bit more detail. Looks like Randy got pretty good scoring across the board. Outside of Mike Williams, who disappointed once again, who's actually going to be out this upcoming week in Week 4. Who he put up 4.5 points. And then, I'm looking at Brett's lineup. That's Mike Williams on Brett's lineup, not Randy's. I apologize. And then Chris Carson, keeper Chris Carson, who's just, hasn't been all that great this year, putting up only 3 points. I feel like Brett's probably a little bit frustrated. And even Josh Jacobs only had 4.4 points on the bench. So Brett is certainly feeling the loss of a solid second quarterback in this league. Derek Carr on the bench put up 15.6 points, which was respectable and would have made it closer, but really wouldn't have made a difference. On Randy's side, as again talked about his high-scoring players, his lowest-scoring player was Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, who only put up 4.9 points. Randy left a lot of points on the bench, though. He had Greg Olsen sitting on his bench, put up 19.5 points. It didn't matter because Evan Ingram, shined against Tampa Bay with a huge touchdown. And he also left Marquise Valdez-Scantling on the bench as well in that one. So, overall, the final score is 161 to 120, 161 to 116.6. Randy takes over the lead in high scoring after that, and he's really picking up where he left off last year and just a dominant team. So that was good. All right, we're going to move now into a close matchup between Team Flynn and Watch What You Say Quan. Again, that's Steve and Mike. Everybody give Mike a good congratulations. He probably isn't going to see this video. He's at his bachelor party. He gets married 6 days from today. And fun story, he gets to be married by yours truly. So get to be an officiant for my first time in my life. Looking into this game, Mike had a big win against Steve. Both teams came into this 1-1, so this was kind of a pivotal matchup here. Mike actually got 19.4 points out of Mitchell Trubisky, thanks in large part to a huge first half where Mitchell Trubisky threw 3 touchdowns on short fields to Taylor Gabriel. Really looked good in that first half, but the second half looked like the Mitchell Trubisky that we've all come to love and understand. Mike was also led by Cooper Kupp at 24.1 points, and Tom Brady at 22.1. So his team across the board did look pretty well. I mean, his keepers, outside of the fact that Saquon put up 3.7 and is going to be missed for 4 to 8 weeks, probably more on the latter side from what reports are saying. That obviously hurts Mike because his running back options behind that are Tariq Cohen or Matt Breida. So he's pretty thin at that position, and as we get into bye weeks, it's going to be even more difficult. He's going to have to really start scourging the waiver wire to get something there. On Team Flynn's side, Steve's side of the court, Matty Ice had what I feel is probably his best game of the year. Let me take a look and validate that. Let us see. Yeah, best game of the year, with 3 touchdowns, an interception. Also picked up 3 yards on the ground, but really the big thing was he had a great game against Philly the previous week, but threw 3 interceptions that game. So 24.4 from Matt Ryan, and then 27.5 from Jameis Winston. So, Steve's quarterbacks are doing great things. Nick Chubb had a good week. Marlon Mack came back into the picture. He's off to a good start. Adam Thielen doing well. Odell Beckham disappointing, but across the board he looked pretty solid. Unfortunately, just didn't have the firepower. This again was the closest scoring matchup of the week. And I think where they sit after that, Steve at 1-2, Mike at 2-1. My prediction for Mike to be in the money is solid, so that's exciting. 134.6 to 120.6 was the final score in that one. Alrighty, looking into our next matchup. And actually, I take that back. Mike and Steve were not the closest scoring matchup. The closest scoring matchup was actually going to be covered in this next one, was between Jake and myself. I think this was the lucky win of the week for me, thanks to, in large part, the emergence of Mike Evans and Keenan Allen, who showed up again in a big way. I felt like we hadn't gotten the production out of them that I had anticipated, and so we had 32.6 points from Keenan Allen and 39 points from Mike Evans. I also got the first double-digit game of the year out of Joe Mixon at 15.4, and a decent showing from Lamar Jackson at 21.2 points. Really made up for my poor running back play with David Montgomery and Leonard Fournette, who both scored in the single digits, and Zach Ertz again, who put up 6.4 points. So, this was a pretty interesting one because after the noon games, Jake had a pretty big lead. I kind of used some voodoo magic on him, told him, nice win. He said, keep that shit away. And, lo and behold, I watched Mike Evans and Keenan Allen go off in the 3 o'clock hour. On Jake's side of the ball, on Jake's side of the field, Russell Wilson, huge game at 45.3 points. Amari Cooper, 20.8. T.Y. Hilton, 12.5. He's probably not going to be suiting up this week. I think he's got a quad injury. And then Phillip Rivers, 21.6 points. Really a strong showing from Jake. He unfortunately lost 143 to 156. On the bench, really not a lot to write home about, except for, on my end, it was Marvin Jones Jr. Really would have been a better flex option for me. Jake's side of the ball, not really a lot outside of potentially starting Rex Burkhead, but nobody planned on that with James White being out this past week. So, unfortunately, Jake would have beat 7 out of the 10 teams if he would have played them. Unfortunately, he played against me, who was the second leading scorer this week, and he was the third leading scorer. Just an unlucky go for him in that one. So he sits at 1-2. I sit at 2-1. I don't predict that to be anywhere near. I don't predict those records to be anywhere near reflective of the strength of teams. My team has been pretty weak up to this point. I've had a couple of lucky wins, and Jake's team is really performing pretty well. So we'll see where all that shakes out. We go in next to Brian versus Andy, which was to the toilet bowl. Brian predicting his next path, and then Team Decent for Andy. Looking across the board on this one, it was separated by about 26 points. Andy got a huge showing from Alvin Kamara after a pretty lackluster performance last week. 28.1 points from Kamara after only getting 6 out of him the week before. So strongest showing of the year for Alvin Kamara, which is exciting. And then Carson Wentz did big things, and so did Deshaun Watson. So 2 quarterbacks really led the way for Andy, along with some solid running back play. Wide receivers left a little bit to be desired. It was 5.8, 5.5, 1.7. That was what Andy rolled out in the way of wide receivers, but he had enough firepower to overcome Brian's lackluster team, who's just kind of spinning. I mean, Philip Lindsay had a big game. Jared Goff, he's not an elite quarterback. He plays on an elite offense, but he's going to have his games. But I think expecting somewhere around 20 points a week from him is going to be probably going to be his ceiling on average. So DeAndre Hopkins, 11.6. Sammy Watkins, huge for Brian this far, 10.8. Matthew Stafford, 16.8 points. It's funny because Jacoby Brissett, I gave Brian crap for starting Jacoby Brissett. He's actually playing pretty well this year. Surprise, surprise. So looking across, I'm sorry, I'm reading the projections. Jared Goff, 14.1 points. Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins put up 6 points. Tyler Boyd, 6 points. I'm reading the wrong stuff for Brian. And on Andy's side, it was 5.5, 5.8, 1.7. So regardless, the final score of this one comes out to be 131.5 for Team Decent, 104.1 for To the Toilet Bowl. Brian falls to 0-3. Andy moves in to be above 500 at 2-1. He's third place in the Moors, and Brian sits at last place in the Moops, hoping for better days ahead. Has been a pretty big fall for him from where he's been in previous years. So heart goes out to you, Brian, on that. Let's see here. I got one more game to cover as I get my morning coffee in. And that is between Eric and Kyle. Sorry, I'm reading team names, not the individual names. So this was almost a 40-point spread here on this one. It was between load management, and maybe next year. I'll tell you, I'm missing. If I could go back and take that Joe Mixon for Julio Jones trade back, I would. It's funny because I had Julio Jones for 5 of this. This is 6th year of the league. I had him for 4.5 years basically. Kept him, and he frustrated me to the point where I said I can't deal with this guy anymore. I got to get rid of him. Traded him for Joe Mixon. Really was banking on that. Unfortunately, Joe Mixon has been a dud thus far, and Julio Jones is probably having his career year. I mean, he's just going off. His splits on the year, point wise, are he had a tough start, but did get into the end zone. 9.1 points in week 1, 26.6 in week 2, and 20.8 last week. He's had 4 touchdowns through 3 weeks, which is more than I probably got from him my entire time owning him, if I were to, just voice my frustration. Dalvin Cook has been an absolute monster this year. I think he comes back down to earth against the Bears this week, but that's just my fandom talking. I'd venture to say Dalvin Cook likely will not be healthy by week 10. The guy is just injury prone. I think he's off to a good start, but 22.3 points really led the way for him. Julio Jones again 20.8, and Mason Rudolph. I mean, starting, he started some scrubs here. I mean, Calamari 17.8 points, and Mason Rudolph 16.4. But when you get 19 points from the Patriots defense, I mean, this guy, it might be his leading scorer, the Patriots defense at this point. With the huge win last week over Miami, and then 19 this week, really helps lead the way. For Eric, Josh Allen actually didn't have a terrible game, 18.3 points. Mark Ingram, really been probably the surprise running back of the year, 33.5, doing really well up there in Baltimore. It's really good to see them not stuck in a committee and really using him. But he had 3 touchdowns this week against Kansas City in a really close game. But his wide receivers just disappointed. Chris Godwin had been pretty solid all year, but ceded all of the production to Mike Evans this week, and then Devontae Adams, Allen Robinson, combined for 11.6 points, and Mark Andrews only had 1.5, which is pretty disappointing in that matchup. But what are you gonna do? Eric's bench left a lot of points out there. 22.1 from the Shep up there in New York, 13 from DJ Chark, and DJ Chark, that's funny. And then Miles Sanders had 10.6 points, so a little bit to be desired. But actually looking at Kyle's bench, LaShawn McCoy had a huge game. I understand sitting him because he was injured coming in, but 20 points out of him. And then Todd Gurley put up 4.3, and actually I think that probably led to Kyle's frustration in the trade that he got, where he flipped Todd Gurley for who did he flip Todd Gurley for? He flipped Todd Gurley for help me out. I gotta go look. Who did Brian trade him? Le'Veon Bell. There we go. That was the trade. So that's where we sit after this week. Looking ahead into the standings, we do have we have 2 undefeated teams still at Randy and Kyle, both 3-0. We have 3 2-1 teams, so that would be Mike, Andy, and myself. 3 3-1, and then 2 3 1-2, and then 2 0-3. Get that? Say that 10 times fast. So really, I mean, it's still early in the season, but we're heading into week 4, which is the quarter mark of the season. So I think we get to see kind of who our teams are and what they are. If we look at points against, Kyle and Randy, even though they're number 1, they actually are 8 and 9, or 9 and 10 rather, in points against. So they do lead the league in points for, but they have, actually Randy has almost 100-point differential And Kyle actually has a 101 point differential in points for versus points against. So certainly probably helping their cause a little bit, but they do have two dominant teams, as you know, like they're going to continue to score points. So can't necessarily say that that's that they're not, that's the reason why they're 3-0, but just, food for thought. Brian sits lowest in scoring. Randy leads the league in scoring and has about an 11-point lead over Kyle. Points against, the team with the most points against actually is Jake. As I mentioned, Jake is he's number, I think, 3 or 4 in scoring. He's 3 in scoring, and he is number 1 in points against. So really shows kind of how his team's shaking out. He's just had a couple of unlucky matchups. Will likely find himself in the playoffs, and it all comes out in the wash. So again, that's kind of where we sit after 3 weeks. Looking into this upcoming week, let's take a look at the matchups, even though they've already started. I will mention the bye weeks in week 4. Let's take a quick look. We have the New York Jets and the San Francisco 49ers on bye this week. You probably already know that if you've looked at your lineup, but it's just nice to at least kind of call that out again. So looking at this upcoming week, the matchups that we have, I am facing off against Eric, maybe next year versus I Suck. Currently, that's a really close matchup. Eric's projected to lose by 0.8 points. However, like I said, that's my upset city of the week. He had a huge showing from Devontae Adams, a career day at 20 points. I got what's become kind of the standard from Zach Ertz at 6.5 points. So that's a matchup. That's a pretty key matchup in the Moops because Eric and that could really influence. That's a positional swing. He's 1-2. I'm 2-0, 2-1. So we have Kyle facing off against Steve. That's actually projected to be a pretty close matchup. Steve currently has a 9-point lead in that one, with Mason Crosby putting up big day, 9 points on Thursday night. Andy versus Brett. Brett is currently projected to beat this out by a large margin. He had a big game from Aaron Rodgers. It's always fun when the Thursday night games, go across the field against each other. So Carson Wentz had 19.7. Aaron Rodgers had 29.4. Big showing from him. The Jamal Williams just dirty hit, injury, whatever you want to call it, kind of catapulted Aaron Jones into a pretty big role this week, so that helped him out. But it's currently looking at 125.8 to 114, projecting Brett to get his first win over Andy. Excuse me, we'll see where that lands. We have Jake versus Brian. Brian's currently projected to get his first win, 116.4 to 113. Neither of those teams had anybody going on Thursday night. And then we have Mike against Randy. Randy is projected to win this thing by a landslide. My prediction for Mike may fall pretty hard after this because, losing Saquon, that guy's a difference maker in in the real world lineup and then in a fantasy lineup as well. He's a guy who really, he can put your fantasy team and the New York Giants on his shoulders. So Randy's projected to get to the 4-0 mark. Again, upset city would be Eric over myself. And yeah, we'll see where all that lands. Again, I apologize for the late uploading of this. Saturday morning is my best time to this week. It's been chaos. Excuse me. But I hope you all have a great week 4. Best of luck. Looking forward to week 5, where I think we actually have the Bears against Oakland and London. So that'll be, again, think about your early morning games. That'll likely be one of those 8 or 9 o'clock Central Time kickoffs. So exciting stuff coming up. Thanks everybody for tuning in. please feel free to leave any comments or feedback. Happy to do whatever I can to make these more valuable. But yeah, looking forward to week 4. Best of luck. We'll talk soon, everybody.